Dí riomh cháirde agus fáilte romh chuig Q&A an lé inniu. Agus inniu tá mé haon agus iman seo. Cé bhfuil tú Emma?
Tá mé go húntaach agus tí féin heáin.
Ionntach ar fad ag baint tainna bheas an neamseir.
Sinné go díreach.
Sinné. There's lovely weather here in Ireland. Tá sé beag nach róthe, almost too hot. So 30 degrees out apparently in places, but
July weather, beautiful.
That's right. Exactly. Ionntach ar fad. So let's get into it then. Gur amach ar fad as na ceistena agus díríomh ar fad, díríomh Jim agus Christina. So nice to see people have already tuned in, and thank you all for the questions. So let's get into them now. So let's see. Let's say an céad ceann an sin a léamh.
Cinnte. Our first question is in from John G. Mullen in County Derry in Ireland. So gur maith John to start us off. And he asks about our payment system in Bitesize, and he asks, can payments be made in euros or sterling? So, Siobhan, an féidir leat é sin a raggart.
Good cínte. So the answer is, if you see on the website, dollars is what's advertised, but euros or sterling, anyone can pay in spite of that. So it's just it converts into dollars, or the system shows dollars, but it would convert into your own currency, be that euros or sterling. So you don't have to be in America. You don't need to have American dollars. It doesn't make that much of a difference. Just it depends on the conversion rates on that day. So it could be a little bit different one day. The price could be compared to the next. So that's easy to do. All you need to do is search the price in dollars. Simply Google it, and it'll bring up what price that is in euros, let's say, or sterling today.
We have a rough estimate on the site underneath the payment. So for $29, it'd be roughly 24 or 25 euros. So in and around, again, as Siobhan said, it changes every day. But you might be in luck. Some months you'd have a cheaper month by a couple of cents. But overall, it doesn't fluctuate too much.
Ionntach ar fad. Mar sin. An chéad cheist eile mar sin, agus tá an ceannseo ó Megan I Nuaurach in New York. Gur amach agad Megan. And her question is, when I see the accent marks, sometimes more than one in a word, does that have to do with where you accent that syllable? And is there something more to do with the lilt of the sound than just the emphasis? Mar sin cén raglar deach agat sa héanaan is ar an gceistúd.
Yeah, so Megan, this is actually a question that a lot of people would have when they're starting off reading Irish. So that accent mark that you see is called a sína fada, or just a fada for short is what it would usually be called. And that is, you'd find a sína fada on vowels, and this then would cause the vowel to be pronounced long. Now you ask, well, what's a long vowel? We have long vowels and short vowels in Irish, or sa Gaeilge. And for example, a short a, or an a, without a fada would be pronounced a, or a. But with a fada then it would change to o, so it elongates the sound of the a. Similarly then with perhaps e, it would be without a fada, and then a with a fada. So you're dragging out that sound, you're elongating the vowel sound, you're making it fada, or long. So this is actually something that we cover in our taster course. So, and our taster course is free. So if you are interested in that, you'll be able to find the link in the description of this video, and also in the blog post that we'll post when this is over, when the live stream is finished. So you'll be able to hear all of the recordings that we have on our Bite-Size Course C or our courses, because it's something that you kind of cover right at the start when you're learning Irish. So it changes a short vowel into a long vowel.
Exactly, and if we were to give an example, you could say, for example, there's two words, similar words here, and it's just the difference of the accent in Sína Fada and without. So the first one here will be fair, and the second is fair. So fair, you're linking the E there, fair, that's grass, and fair, that's a man. So fair, you're not stressing the E at all. And there are many probably better examples of that as well. And that's it. And that's a very good explanation you did there. You gave there, Emma. That's it. It's just lengthening, because fada means long, so you're just making the sound longer. And when it comes to syllables, there is usually, if you have, let's say, a word with multiple syllables, usually if just one of those syllables contains a Sína Fada, a fada, you will usually stress or place the emphasis when pronouncing that word on that syllable containing the fada. So that's how it would usually be. So if you have two syllables, the first syllable contains the fada, you'll stress the first syllable in that word. That's usually how it is. There are exceptions, but that's usually how it is. It's a good rule of thumb. Anwa, Martin Bogi Misharai. So let's move on. And agus tá ar géad ceistela ó Andrew, the Stáit. So our next question is from Andrew in the United States. Hi, Emma and Huan. As you know, I'm a Bite-Size Grow member. I'm enjoying learning the language very much. I'd like to know your thoughts about UNESCO's labelling Irish as a definitely endangered language and the Irish government's efforts to encourage and strengthen use of the language. Are you encouraged by these efforts? Míle buíochas, Andrew. Gura míle maithagad, Andrew, as the Theachtarach Dálan. Thank you for your lovely message. And Andrew also linked there to an article in the Irish Independent about the UNESCO's about UNESCO stating that Irish is definitely endangered. Eoilíonn smaointe agat faoi sin, Emma.
Kinta. So, Andrew, I was happy to see this question come in because minority languages, endangered languages, this is something I kind of deal with as well in my studies. And I actually read that article and it's a new enough article, I think it came out this month or last month, but UNESCO has actually had Irish labelled as an endangered language for a while now, for a good few years. I tried to figure out exactly when, but I could find articles about it way back till, well, as far as 2015. So between then or beforehand, I would presume beforehand. But I had a look at the UNESCO website as well and their chart of how they categorise languages. And their chart goes from up the top, we have safe. So, for example, English, safe. And we have vulnerable, we have definitely endangered, we have severely endangered, we have critically endangered, and then we have extinct. So there's 6 categories that a language could fall into according to UNESCO. Now, Irish has been labelled as definitely endangered. Now, that's actually only 3 down, so that's 3 out of 6. So we're halfway, we're in the middle with Gaeilge. So there's safe, vulnerable, and definitely endangered. And I looked then at the criteria. What criteria are there for, what do UNESCO say? Well, it is definitely endangered. Why? So one that I found on the site was that children no longer learn the language as a mother tongue in the home. And I did a little bit more research, and another site said that it's being used as a primary language by 44,000 or fewer people in the country, so 44,000 or less. Now, you'll find many things online, many numbers and figures as to how many Irish speakers there are. You'll see a figure of about 1 million or 1,200,000 or something like that. Unfortunately, that is, in an ideal world, the amount of maybe fluent speakers of Irish, but unfortunately it's not, because there's a spectrum on, if you ask someone, do you have Irish or can you speak Irish? Some people would say yes, and they would only have, basics. Other people would say yes, and they're fluent. So there's kind of a very large range to figure out, how many actual speakers are that can maybe conduct their life through Irish. So they say around 20 to 40,000, and I would say probably closer to the 20,000 number. So I understand why it's labelled as endangered, but that doesn't mean that it's going to die off anytime soon, because there's hundreds of endangered languages, and Ireland has been endangered for years and years and years, and we haven't gone any further down the list into severely endangered. So maybe if we hit that, we should be worried. But in regards to then the funding and the support from the government, there's a lot being done. In my opinion, there's always room for improvement and room for more. I'm sure Siobhan will agree with me there. But for example, in 2021, there has been over 1.6 million euro approved for Tishmahori, or parents who want to raise their children in Irish. And also 3.4 million was granted, I suppose, to Údarás na Gaeltachta and Feras na Gaeilge to help with language planning. So that's just, for example, two things that have done in 2021. Now, there is a 30-year plan for Irish, or 20-year plan actually, isn't it? Set out since 2018. And there's work being done, but I think there's always room for more. So I wouldn't really worry because if you hear the word endangered, I think that can sense a sense of, there's a sense of panic induced with that. But I wouldn't panic, because every day I see there's new people joining Bite Size, there's new people wanting to learn the language, there's people enrolling in courses. So just because it's considered an endangered language because children aren't being brought up with the language as often as they were, that doesn't go to say that there's not adults and young people learning the language at a later time. So it's changing. The idea of being brought up in Irish is great, and that's obviously the goal, but there's other ways around it, and that's my opinion. Siobhan, cad ceapan tú?
That's the thing. There wouldn't be, as you were saying, there's probably is close to 20,000 people who would use Irish as their primary everyday language in the home anyway, as that's probably how the question would be asked, if you use Irish as your primary language in the home or not. I think that's how it's asked on the census forms. But so it would be about between 20 and 40,000, all right. So that's one of the reasons definitely that it'll be in this endangered list. And as you said there as well, compared to previous decades, I suppose going back further, and the amount of children who are raised with Irish as their home language, I would imagine is falling. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I would imagine so. There are more Gaelscoil in it though. So I suppose things have moved out of the home for better or for worse. But in many senses, I suppose, many things in society have moved out of the home. And I suppose society isn't as home-based as it once was. So it's kind of inevitable that this would affect language as well. But of course, as you were saying, that's definitely the ideal, where the parents and the children speak the same language together, and nothing will ever replace the fact of being raised with Irish from infancy, or even just from childhood at some stage, even if it's in a bilingual home or trilingual, or however many, it'll never be the same as learning a language when you're older. But that being said, that doesn't mean that people shouldn't learn a language when they're older. Of course not. It's really important, and people who learned Irish when they were older have and are doing so much for the Irish language. And so it's not just for people who are raised with Irish. So it depends on what is being raised with Irish means. Some people were raised with a real mixture of Irish and English, whereas and ended up in adulthood not being able to really communicate fully in the Irish language, because they would mix both English and Irish up so much. So there are people who only learned Irish later in life who actually have a much higher standard of Irish. So it's not exactly black and white in that sense, but definitely the ideal is proper fluent Irish from a young age. But that's just how things are anyway. But as you're saying, that there, Emma, it is great that we are only in third place and not at all, not further down. It is brilliant. And as you're saying, it's been endangered. And if you look at the old maps from the 19th century, of the decline of the Irish language, you'll see just how much Irish was lost during the 19th century and into the 20th century. And so when you think of it, like, it's not today or yesterday that this problem began. And so we're still here, and that's the main thing, and we have to keep moving forward. And it's good to be aware as well of the risks, I think, and of the predicament we're in, but not getting too downtrodden about it either. We have to soldier on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Exactly. It's a slow process. Hopefully we can work our way back out of it, but it's not something that you can do overnight. So with support from the government and also support from speakers, from new learners, new schools, children, even who's to say that the children who are attending Gaelscoil in the now wouldn't bring their children up with Irish. They mightn't have had Irish themselves in the home, but that doesn't go to say that that the cycle can begin again with that. So that's a hope for the future, which will take time. People have to grow up and have children and start from scratch. So we can check back in 20 years and see where we are then with the new age.
And so many people have done that. They didn't learn Irish. They didn't have Irish in their homes, and when they had their own children, they did raise them through Irish.
Absolutely.
So it definitely wouldn't be a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great that there's hope for everyone. So that's the thing. Everyone can play their part, but of course it takes the effort. But very good. Ítach ar fad. Mar sin, an ceist ar fad, an ceist ar fad and sin Andrew. Good amagad. That was a brilliant question. Right, so let's move on now. Bugam is rai gji ceist o Merton I Maliat Lia in Éireann. So Merton's in Dublin, I Maliat Lia. Agus an ceist atá ag Merton an sin ná Cunas tá tú Emma agus siúán, tá ceist agam más féidirm. I enjoy bite-sized bio. And féidirm mira, how often does the scripts change? You do a great job. Go to Mahagat. Go to me in a Mahagat, Martin. So the scripts there Martin is referring to are those scripts that are used during bite-sized bio. So they're used as conversation aids, so conversational aids. So what's people go, so there are two parts in each script, and people take turns reading out each part before we go and have a little conversation or a little question time based on that topic, whatever topic the script is based on. Currently we have 9 scripts. So those are scripts like little conversations based on 9 different topics, including occupation, hobbies, speaking about your family, stuff like that. So and giving directions, so it can vary. So there's more simplistic ones, and then there are a little bit more complicated ones, but they're geared towards every ability. So and level of Irish. But when it comes to how often they change, so at the moment they're running 9, but there's a different one every week. So it kind of goes in a cycle, I guess, of about 9 weeks. So if you come across one script now, you won't be coming across that again for another 9 weeks. So that's a little over 2 months, or about 2 months. So it's not too repetitive. And also, I can see like many who attend the Bite-Size BO regularly, even though they might have already reached quite an advanced level of Irish, they find that they're always getting something extra, because you can always learn something new, even from very familiar sentences. And you see that that there's always something. So even if the person's really good at pronouncing the words, reading the words aloud in the script, they can, when it comes to kind of the question conversation time, they'll have more to say to each other. They can say more just off the cuff. And also when we go through the grammar and pronunciation, people often have questions, even if they're a bit more general than what the topic exactly is in and of itself. So it's that's how often the scripts change. So I would say it kind of works in a 9-week cycle at the moment. That might grow. All right, Shane. And that Bite-Size BO is held, by the way, every week on a Tuesday at 8 o'clock Irish time. And myself, I'm the one who let's say is who hosts that, as we'd say. So ionintach ar fad. Mar sin tá ciste an seo ó Christina in California. What's the common name that the Irish currently use to refer to their grandmother? An informal nickname. I have read that it could be Mamo. And William Rudler all good free sin, Emma.
Tá, so Christina Germagut, and your reading was correct. It would be Mamo. Your Shanwar would be the general name for a grandmother, but Mamo would be the one that I would use anyway, that I've always used, I've always learned. If you want to call your grandfather then, granddad, grandpa, whatever you'd say, and that would be Dado then. So Mamo agus Dado. I was trying to think if I knew any others, but I don't. Siobhan, an bhfuil ein animile agat? No, an bhfuil tú.
Clister i ngéilge óla Máthar Chríocha. So you often hear in Ulster Irish, Máthar Chríocha.
I like that actually. That is very nice.
Because Chríocha, I guess, it kind of wise from experience, in a sense, that wisdom that comes from old age, in a sense, or maturity. So it is a nice one, Máthar Chríocha. I'll just write that one up there as well. When it comes to grandfather, well, Shan Ahar, Shan plus the word Ahar as one word, as we had there with Shan Wahar, grandmother. So Shan Ahar would be the general word for grandfather. Yeah, so there is another word for Máthar Chríocha, a more Ulster term. And so there's that one. I'm not sure if there's any others. Ahar Chríocha, you could say as well, of course, Ahar Chríocha. And you can also say, I know that people say Máthar Mhór or Ahar Mhór. So Mhór meaning big. So you could say Ahar. So Máthar Mhór or Ahar Mhór. So that's Mhór as in big. It's similar to English there with grand. So you could say that. So Máthar Chríocha, Ahar Chríocha. So kind of wise in a sense. Mother, but also kind of means old but wise. There's a few meanings to Chríocha, but then more, of course, is big or grand or great in a sense. So that's those. But of course, when it comes to the informal names, Mamo and Dado would be those. And Christina, there you spelt Mamo a little differently from how it's spelt here on the screen, but that is a very common spelling too, to spell it M-A-I-M-E-O, but you'll find M-A-M-O for the more common in dictionaries, but it would be the same thing really. So same word anyway. So those are the informal ones, so a bit like granny and granddad, or the like, or nanny or nan. So ítach ar fad anha ó mama. Ítach. Agus an cíd cist eile bhaid leis an cíd cist eile léomh sin éime.
Kinta. So this kist comes in from Richard Lawrence in Western New York. So Gurmila Mahmoud Richard. And he says, I'm not currently studying Irish, but I'm curious to know approximately how many active students you are currently helping. I'm mainly interested in the phonetics of the written language, but I don't have a specific question pertaining to that. So Gurmila Mahmoud Richard, and if you come up with a question on any of the phonetics, you can ask for in our next live stream. So Hiwan, how many active students do we have? Would you know?
That's a very good question. That's good. Well, what does active mean in a sense? People are learning. I'm afraid I don't have the latest numbers. Maybe you'd have a better idea yourself, Emma.
Yeah, we look at the numbers, but we only look at, how many come in per month. So we actually haven't done a total tally of everyone. And it's also hard to know because we have two memberships with Bitesize. We have Explore and we have Grow. And Explore gives the members access to the Course C. Now, if I have access to the Course C, does that mean I'm an active member? Because we can't know if people are actually doing the Course C and doing the courses and the lessons. We just know that they're a member of Bitesize. So we do get many per month. There's a good few coming in per month. And then with Bio, you have, or not with Bio, with Grow even, we have those who attend Bio each Tuesday, hosted by Siobhan. We also have, members that are active on our online Pubble, which I am very hard working on every day, chatting to everybody. So I couldn't give you a number, and neither could Siobhan, but we have a nice amount of people coming in and interested per month in both Course C. So if you were interested, depending on if you are an active learner, we would say, apply for our Grow program. We say, if you want to join, we'd love if you were doing your Course C and extra learning on your own as well, outside of that, being part of the Pubble and, being active in that. But if you're wanting to do it with your own time, take little bite-sized bites of Irish, you could sign up for our Explore membership. So unfortunately, we can't give you a number, Richard, but maybe at the end of the year, we might do a total tally. We'll see.
Well, the most active, I would say, are in their dozens anyway. The most active. But again, it depends on what counts as active. But
absolutely.
That would be,
It depends as well what people are doing. There's, people have to take a little break and come back, and so it fluctuates. It absolutely fluctuates because people's circumstances change, and people come off for the summer holidays and then they go off on their holidays, so they give Irish a rest and then they come back. So so I'll go on to the next question then. So Gurmagad Richard, and the next question comes from Jean or Jeanne, I'm not sure, but she writes in from the USA as well. So she asks, is there anywhere I can find the Hail Holy Queen prayer in Irish with pronunciation tips? So Gurmila Mahmoud, agus Siobhan, cad cheapan tú?
Well, tá Sean on. There is a video, and it goes through the prayer line by line. And if you just want the words of the prayer, you can simply Google Salve Regina, that's the Hail Holy Queen in Latin, and Os Gaeilge. So often you'll see the Hail Holy Queen titled in Latin in Irish. But otherwise, so you could do that if you just want the words. But if you want to find this video, so I'll just post the URL, which is a bit hard to get from the screen, but what I'll do is I'll link this in the blog post that's linked in the description box of this video. So following this live stream, soon after, you'll be able to see this link and be able to click on it. As I'm fully certain it's hard to type that or write that down just on the screen. But if you just Google Salve Regina Gaeilge or you search that on YouTube, you might actually get it. But it's a lovely video where it does line by line Irish and English the English translation, and just slow pronunciations of each word. So it only does it like 2 words at a time. So it's actually quite good for learners. So it's a nice little video there, and I just came across it there as I wasn't aware of its existence. So it's nice to see always some new material, or maybe it's not exactly new, but it's always nice to see material there for to help everyone. So let's see now, Nish. So as I was saying, you'll find that in the blog post below following the live stream. Martin, gur amach san sin. Nish tá ceistena agin ag teachtasteach. So we have some questions here coming in from the live chat. Gur míle amach. And so our first one there is from Jim. Agus an ceiste tá ag na cén leabhar is fearr in Gaeilge tá mé léamh an Tilianach. So cén leabhar is fearr in Gaeilge. What's your favorite book in Irish? Tá mé léamh an Tilianach. I'm reading an Tilianach, which has been translated to English as the Islander, and that's literally what it means, the Islander. So it's a Kerry book right there. Martin, and cén leabhar is fearr leatsa, Emma?
Well, Kesh sin. I'm actually reading a couple, if I'm allowed to do that. I dip in and out. I think I have a low attention span sometimes with books in every language. But one I always love and I come back to and I actually use when I teach as well is another Kerry Mann's book, which is A Hignot Titterm, Le Mike Danino Shea. It's on the curriculum for school. That's when I first found it in my secondary school days, doing my final exams. It was one of the books that we had to read, and I think everybody dreaded it because it's a difficult enough book in the sense that it's there's a lot of dialectical bits in it, and the way that it's spelled, he wrote as he spoke, so it didn't often have your usual or expected spelling for a lot of the words. So I would say that the majority of the class didn't love it. I know there was a couple of fans of it, but I absolutely love it. So I still have it in my bookshelf and I use it. I dip in and out to the chapters. Another book that I read actually recently, and it's a short enough book, so I would actually recommend it to learners or kind of intermediate learners, which is On Tashtali, it's called. And it's kind of a mystery, little strange story about a boy who goes to Paris for the summer to work. And it's a bit of a strange story, but I really like it. And another book that I also dip in and out of because it's a collection of short stories, and it's called Geor Scéalta an Chéad. And it has a collection of stories from many authors, which, I like. It's a nice one that you can pick it up and leave it down because they're short enough stories that you don't have to read a big, thick book, which I'm adverse to doing that, so that's just a personal one. Other people love to sit down and read a really thick, nice book. I like dipping in and out. That's my style, I think. So they're my favourites at the moment. Huan, Cén leabhar, I see a bookshelf behind you, so you must have a few for us.
Oh, it's well. I also liked the Hignat Itcher. I also did it for the Leaving Cert, and it was very enjoyable. And there was actually, I suppose, it's a bit of a pity they stopped where they stopped in the book, because I think the chapters further on would have been of more interest to teenagers. But it's a fun book. And Until Yonach is another good book, and also Fiche Bliain Fós, another book from the Blascade, from the Blasket Islands, as was Until Yonach. So Fiche Bliain Fós, that is 20 years growing, as you might see it translated as. So 20 years growing, that's a nice fun book as well. A bit similar to a Hignat Itcher, but further back in time. And that's very nice. I like that one. One of those kind of coming. It's in a sense it's biographical, but there's a bit of a coming of age factor in it as well, because it goes from his childhood to his adulthood, but also later on in his life as well. But it's a nice one. So just write that quickly. But it's a very famous, one of the most famous Irish books. But there's also another book that I have liked very much, and it's not that famous at all, and the name of it is Your Own Tool. So it kind of means like a tear from the eye. And it's a very thin little book, but it's very sweet. It's kind of old, it's a bit like the old mythological Irish stories in a sense, but it's a bit like the Shanachie storytelling method. So this man, he's written a few of these little books, these stories, and you might have a banshee in it, but you also have the local characters, and it's a bit in a sense, it's a bit of a magical land in a way, but it's based in just rural Ireland, and I've liked those books. But Your Own Tool was my favourite. And of course, another favourite of mine would be Fianna Fíorchaí, or really the short stories, Gair Scéalta and Fíorchaí. So the Pearse's short stories, they're really beautiful. I was reading recently Onin. Again, it's just
Onin na Nain, yeah.
Onin na Nain, that's right.
That's actually one of the stories that's in that Gair Scéalta an Chiad, and yeah, it's the first story when you open that short stories book. And it's in another book from, my mother gave it to me. It was her school book in the 70s or the 80s even. The book is there's a Dúnara, and there's another one that have all a collection of stories that were on the curriculum back in the 70s and the 80s, and Onin na Nain is in there as well. It's a really, really lovely story. I agree with you.
It is, and so much of his stories are really lovely and quite unique. So there's another one there. So there's the story we're referring to there, Onin na Nain. So so that's it. Those would be the ones that come to mind immediately. But there are loads of books, very interesting books in Irish. Often the most recent fiction in Irish, or the fiction within the past few decades, can be a little bit unusual compared to what you'll find in English, as you mentioned there with An Taistilí. And it was I just had a conversation today about that very topic of like how unusual, in a sense, Irish fiction can be. So it's not your run-of-the-mill stuff. It can often be a bit fanciful or out there, and it can be quite unusual. But that's the thing. So there's a lot of Irish fiction out there of different sorts. So
we welcome all of your suggestions in the chat and in the comments. And I just see Tina asks, will these book titles be in the notes? They will indeed. We'll include the titles of those books in the notes on our blog after this. So you can comment below if you're rewatching this, or right now if you're in the chat. You can. We love to share, because I love getting recommendations myself as well. So good. Okay, we can move on to the next question that came in, and that is from Nathaniel from Oregon territory in the USA. So Gurmil Mahagat Nathaniel. So he says, "Dear Wit, my name is Nathaniel and I've been drawn to this community after having taken the Taster course. Now my daughter and I are learning terms right and left with some minor sentence structure. We are looking forward to being full members and in the meantime are becoming fans of the team. To get to the point, my question is, if the translation of the sentence music is his life in Irish is Níl ina héal ach ceol, which was provided by folklore.ie, then could I ask how to say music is my life? So music is his life, and then he wants to know what is music is my life. So Siobhan, how did there into?
Well, Níl ina héal ach ceol, that literally means not. It's a bit like saying there's nothing in his life but music. All there is in his life, all that he has in life, kind of in a sense, is music. In a sense, so his whole life revolves around music. That's what you're conveying in a sense. But it does make sense though, as it does make sense translated as music is his life, as that does really that does. You would be understood as meaning his life revolves around music. But if you want to say music is my life rather than his life, so we have a little bit of changing to do to that sentence. So since the sentence literally means there is nothing in his life but music, we have to now say there is nothing in my life. So you have to change his life to my life. So a héal or a héal was his life. My life is mo héal. So immo is in my, ina was in his, or it could be in hers or in theirs, but that's another story. But immo is in my life, so imma héal. So níl ma héal ach ceol. So there is nothing in my life but music. Music is my life. So there you have how you say that. Níl ma héal ach ceol. Mar sin. Ínta gur fad Nathaniel. Agus sin éon is bugam is raisocha go dtí an chéad chist eile. So our next question comes from Frank in San Diego, California. And his question is, how do I find people local to practice Irish with? Also, how do I know which version to learn? How it's spoken in Galway versus Donegal. Goramagat hain, Frank. Ní sé bhfuil éon regra agat don question.
Tá. So in regards to finding local people or people, you know, maybe even online, you can always check peg.ie, so PEIG.ie. Siobhan will put it up on the screen. And that, the site is available in English and in Irish. So even if your Irish isn't, you know, you get a bit intimidated that the site is Oscailge, you can switch it up the right hand corner to English, and you can then go to the events page there, and it has a list of every event, every Irish language event, well, almost every, around the world that, you know, is going on or that happens regularly. So you will see a lot of Circle Córas there, and that would be a conversation circle. And they take place across the States, in Europe, Australia, you name it, you might find one. And if there's none around you, then maybe do a call out for your local people to see if there's any other Irish speakers around. So PEG will give you a comprehensive list of that, and that's regularly updated as well. And I'm just thinking there, Facebook is always a handy one to do a little call out as well. Maybe search some groups on Facebook. I can't think of any, well, it depends where you are in the world. So do a little search on Facebook and check Facebook groups and Irish language Facebook groups. You'd be surprised who you'd find there. And then in regards to which dialect, we get this question a lot on Bite Size, and anyone who's involved in the Irish language and, you know, they meet a new speaker, oftentimes they have a worry of which dialect to speak. And some people can easily choose. They might have family, you know, if they're living in the States or in the UK or in Australia or around Europe, oftentimes they might have family or ancestors that are in a certain area of Ireland. So it makes sense for them to learn that dialect of that area. So for example, if Mary in New York had family, her grandmother was from Kerry, well, I would presume that she would want to learn Kerry Irish or Munster Irish or Munster dialect. But when you don't have any ties, you kind of have free reign. It's totally up to you, and there's no preference. And, you know, of course, myself as a Munster Irish speaker, I'm just going to be a bit biased and say Munster Irish just because, you know, I speak it. But that doesn't go to say that you can't learn Ulster, or I think that Ulster Irish is more difficult. It's totally up to you, and you'll be understood across the board. Even I've had students here that I teach that want to go to the Gaeltacht, and I teach them Munster Irish here, and they, unfortunately, due to COVID, there's no Gaeltacht courses going ahead in person except for ones in Donegal in Ulster, and they were a bit afraid to book the course. They were saying, "Oh, Emma, what will we do?" I said, "That's actually the best thing you can do now, because you have a broader understanding. So you will be understood, and most books that you do get are following the official standard of Irish in regards to grammar and writing. So you can start off with a book if that's the way you want to go, and you will have a general idea, and then you can pick whatever one suits you." Siobhan, on Bhléin Rodella, a good flicker.
Oh, well, I'd say, yeah, don't be too bothered about dialect. I would say get a general grasp of the language. And then, only then, I think, will you really know which dialect is for you, which you find most appealing. And as you were saying there, Emma, it might depend on your ancestry, or simply maybe you strike up a friendship with a few people, and they happen to be from a specific area or happen to have a specific dialect, and that might be how. Or maybe you'll get a teacher who has, let's say, Ulster Irish, so you just turn out speaking Ulster Irish. So I wouldn't say none of them, not even neither, because there's more than two, but none of the dialects are superior to other dialects. So it's really all up to yourself which you go for. Just find out more about them, have a listen, and see which suits you best. And it's something that can happen over time. And it's I wouldn't worry about it until you've got a decent grasp of the language, until you're proficient enough. And I know some people recommend that you start with a specific dialect from the beginning. And if you'd like to do that, that's fine. I just research by Googling, I guess, the different types of dialect there are, and listening to clips, let's say, of speakers from those dialects. And that's really it. But you probably won't, to be honest, you probably won't have much veneer for each dialect and to really grasp the differences between the dialects until you have a decent grasp of Irish. So that's kind of hard to do of your own accord without actually, let's say, turning up to a class and the teacher practically choosing the dialect for you, because that's the dialect the teacher speaks. So that might be the case. So it really depends on many factors. So basically, don't worry about it. And you can even change your dialect to a certain extent, as people do through their lives, even in their native language. People change their accents. People start using turns of phrases they would have never used a few years previous. So it's nothing to worry about. And
I've met speakers who actually have a mix of both, a bit of Munster and Connacht, and it's never a problem. And you first meet it when you learn how to say "how are you." That's actually one of the first ones that you see, all three dialects in most books as well. They list all three of them, and people get a bit put off, and they think that therefore it's really important to know exactly at the start which one. It's not. You see it in the first "hello" and "how are you," but after that you won't meet dialectical differences for a long time. You know, and it starts with little grammar points and things like that, and, you know, obviously your pronunciation. But don't worry too much about it. Pick what you like the sound of, I would say.
The most important thing is that you're actually learning and speaking Irish. That's the most important thing.
Exactly.
Alright, Shane. Tá kis eile agin. Right, let's can sin a léh
Kinta, yeah, so Patricia Oxley in Yorkshire in the UK asks, I want to know just how to make the Irish language my own. Now, I had to have a little think about this one because I thought that is a good question. You can think of it in a deep way as well. I couldn't answer that way for you, but starting off, I'm going to presume that you're learning, maybe you're starting off or maybe you're on your journey of learning Irish. And what I would say automatically to that is learn vocabulary, learn phrases, learn the Irish that applies to you, that applies to your life. Start off with things that are personal to you, obviously how to talk about yourself, things that you're interested in. If you're not interested in sports, don't start with that. Start with things that you feel like you will use in your everyday life with Irish, and practice, our motto, Gaeilge gach lá. And that's how I would say, to make it your own. And then you'll be able to express yourself more in the language, and you'll feel like, more of a connection to the language. As well as that, then you could go down the route of music and songs in Irish, and poetry and stories, whatever you're into. If you're into music, learn those, listen to those, and that's how I would say making the Irish language your own. Siobhan, an bhfuil scéal eile leatsa chun é sin a bhíú?
Well, Aontim go hilas cumná leat, it's on Wolty Tude, so those were great suggestions there. Those were brilliant suggestions, but let's say get something that really clicks with you, that's connected to Irish. So if you're really into something, try and do it through Irish, something that you're really interested in life already, whatever that may be. Try and adapt that to in a way that you can use Irish while doing it, or somehow connected to it. So if you love knitting, for example, try and find out some maybe knitting terms, and maybe while you're knitting, let's say, you're just, instead of saying, oh, I dropped a pearl, let's say it in Irish, stuff like that. And this sort of thing. So just to, even if you've no one else to talk to, simply talk to yourself in your mind often. Tá mé critál, I'm knitting. Even just like thoughts, or just looking at what you're doing, looking at things around you. So it's that sort of thing that's one way of doing it, but really incorporating Irish into what you're already interested in. I'd say that's one way of making Irish your own, because then it really becomes relevant in your life. So that's what I'd recommend. But those are brilliant recommendations there, Emma. Agus, there's a good question there that came in the live chat. So it just arrived. What's a good Irish to English and English to Irish dictionary? So there are quite a few. William can ring agus and Emma.
Well, if you're wanting to be online, which we are now, you have an extensive dictionary, Teanglann.ie and folklore.ie. And they're interlinked, so you can go from Teanglann into folklore. You can access all of those. Another one, well, you can always get pocket dictionaries and things in stores, but these two are the two main dictionaries. Terma.ie as well is a good site that kind of sums up both of those. They're all interlinked together. An older one that you might not be able to find so commonly in print, or it could be a bit expensive, you can find it online, would be Dineen's dictionary as well, which would be a bit of an older one. I don't have a hard copy myself, but I did find a PDF of it online. So have a look out for those. But if you're starting off with Gaeilge and you're looking for terms, if you're looking for English terms into Irish, I would suggest using folklore.ie. It gives really lovely examples as well, and everything's hyperlinked, so you can check words and you can really do an extensive search. And then if you're looking for Irish to English dictionary, I would say Changlin, and that also covers grammar and pronunciation quite well. And also there's an Irish to Irish dictionary on that site that you can make use of for maybe some synonyms as well. So Sin Mochole.
On Chorle Fad. And I'd also recommend on Folklore Polka, which is literally the pocket dictionary. And it goes both ways. But also, I would say if you just Google an Irish dictionary, that's both Irish to English, English to Irish, anything you find will be grand. I don't know of any dodgy one that's out there. Anyone just like one published by the Gem, I think Gem Little Dictionary. I think it was a Gem one. There's Collins, and it's good for publishers. Practically anything you'll see, any dictionary is going to be fine. I don't think there's any.
No, I don't think there's any terribly bad ones. And Folklore Scolia as well is a nice one from school times. I have a copy of that as well, and it's nice and simple. But it depends what you're looking for. But online, the most accessible, nicest to use, I think, are Folklore and Changlin, for all learners of every level.
Definitely, they're the best. You can even hear the words on both those sites. It's wonderful, much better than any printed dictionary. It's much better. Íntacar fad, gur maith agat an giscin. Íntacar fad agus Íntacar fad, and I just see someone there saying that they'd like to say the rosary in Irish, and when we're talking about incorporating Irish into your daily life, like if you say the rosary, why not adapt it? If you're saying something, doing something, if you like to read in the evenings, why not try and read a simple Irish book as well as whatever else you'd be reading or doing something. So it's always good to kind of translate your life into Irish. So there's another example. Íntacar fad, mar sin an bhfuil aon agin daon cistile.
Tá ceist amháin eile, Gwyn, I think.
One more question now.
Down our last one there, Siobhan. Daniel
ó Hasanna. Mar sin gur míle maith Daniel, agus Daniel is also a GROW member and active on Pobble, our community, online community. So Daniel says, I understand that to say that one knows in Irish, it is common to say that one has knowledge. Tá isagam. So I'll just bring that up on the screen as well, because it'll be easier to follow as there's some Irish written on the screen as well. So here we have the first part of that question. So I understand that to say that one knows Irish, it's common to say that one has knowledge. Tá isagam. But I'm afraid I don't understand why there is an e in the sentence and it's not tá fisagam. Also, is there a verb form of knowing in Irish, or is knowledge always a noun? Finally, some languages have distinct verbs for knowing in effect and knowing a person. For example, French has savoir and connaître, and I'm just going to butcher the German, I'm afraid. In Irish, I'll leave that up to you, Emma. Is Irish like French and German in this regard, or is it more like English in not differentiating between these two terms of knowing? Gur míle maith giasocht gach mhór gabhar agus gach mhór obair go hintach le baitais. Gur míle maith, Daniel. Gur míle maith. So, cén regra a bheith agat an sin an gcéad cist, Emma? What would your answer be there to the first part of that question?
Part, yes. So knows in Irish, and yeah, it's common to say tá a isagam. And yeah, you would see that written, definitely, tá a isagam. But just as a side note, when you're saying it, it would often kind of run into each other and you'd hear tuisagam, tuisagam. or nilasam as well, you'd say. So with that in there, why is it there? That is a possessive adjective. Correct me if I'm wrong, Siobhan. So that is that idea of mo, do, a. So mine, yours, his, hers, etc., like we mentioned earlier. And you're thinking, well, what's that got to do with anything? So níl or tá a is agam. So if you break it down, it means its knowledge is at me, or I have the knowledge, or I have. It sounds silly when you say it in English, but I have the knowledge. The knowledge of it is at me, and it's a isagum. That a causes lenition or shavu at fis, because fis is a masculine noun. So it's I know it's, but it's technically his because it's a masculine noun. You treat it like him, and so its knowledge is at me, or I have that knowledge, or the knowledge, or its knowledge. And I liked that idea of likening it to, well, I don't know anything about French, Siobhan, Sfedo Latza Kaurulam, but definitely with German, with the idea of kennen and wissen. So German, it functions the same way. So in German, you would say, for example, like wissen. Wissen is to know something. It's to have knowledge. A Wissenschaftler is someone that, is a scientist, someone that knows things about anything, right? A Politikwissenschaftler is, a political expert. So they have knowledge, and that's the same idea of fis, and even the word olus as well could be substituted in there in Irish. And then the idea of kennen in German, if anyone's a German speaker, you'd more so use that for knowing something or someone. So it's for knowing them, almost like recognizing them. So it would be the same then in Irish as ahana. So in Irish you'd say tá ahana agam someone. So I know someone. Or tá ahana agam shin. I recognize that. I know that whatever film or something like that. So if you're familiar with German, at least, kennen versus wissen is the same idea as ahana versus fis or olus in Irish. Siobhan, mother leis an rankish, an bhfuil rankish a frankish agat.
Biogan, is cúhan na mé sin savoir versus Knetra. And that's it. It'd be very similar to German there, and
even in Spanish as well, as far as I know.
It's probably the norm in most, or many at least, European languages.
Yeah,
often English can be the odd one out. You can often see many more similarities between Irish and, let's say, German and French and many other European languages, where just English is out on its own, but almost. But that's the thing. So this is another example of that. So yeah, there you can say that I know something that I know someone. I know Sean, but also that thing as you mentioned there about Scunna on a film or something. You might hear people say that about a place as well, because it's not just the fact that the place exists, but it, the streets, loads. It's a deeper thing. You kind of know the character of it. It's even with anything like that, it might not be exactly a person, because there's much more involved in simply knowing that the thing exists or not. You kind of know it in the sense of having a deeper knowledge of it. You know a lot about it. Its character in a sense. And there's also a way of saying I know when it comes to fact and knowledge that's similar to tá isalcum, and that's tá sé ar óla salcum. So a different sentence structure altogether there. Tá sé ar óla salcum. Literally it would be it is on information at me. So I have it on information, kind of. And
that's think about it's on your head. That's how I always think about it.
When I'm thinking of it, all right. And that's one way of saying I know it. It's a little bit different from Tá Sagam. Tá sé róla sagam is more like you, in a sense, I like to think of it as you have attained like some sort of intelligence on something, like a spy or something, you know. So you've gotten the information about it. Tá sé róla sagam. So Tá Sagam, I know. You know or you don't know. Tá sé róla sagam, you have knowledge. There's more knowledge maybe involved in simply knowing something.
You can like you could say Tá isagam faoin árán sin ach níl sé róla sagam. So I know the song. I know the song, like I've heard of the song, but I don't know it. So you couldn't sing it off the top of your head. So knowing it is, you know, Tá isagam sin, yeah, I know about it, but I don't know anything knowledge-wise. So if you know it then deeply, you've read the book or you know it off by heart, then, you know, Tá sé ar róla sagat.
That's a brilliant example there, wonderful example. And you would actually hear that phrase quite often, Tá sagam ach níl sé róla sagam, that's it. So you know, but you don't know at the same time. You don't know anymore except of its existence. That's very good. Iontacher fad. And just that to touch on that element of Daniel's question, is there a verb form of knowing in Irish, or is knowledge always a noun? I can't think of a verb version of knowing. Can you, Emma?
I think I read somewhere there's an older verb that's not used anymore. I can't think of the name. If I do, though, I will put it in the notes for you, Daniel, or I can let you know on Bite Size Public as well. But I'm sure other people might be interested, so I'll see if I can find it. If not, then take it that I didn't find it for you.
Iontacher fad mar sin an wather fad. Agus iontacher fad mar sin agus an bhfuilín cisteanna eile nó an bhágamid an sinné beidir bhágamid an sinné do nocht. Mar sin bhí si go deas a bheith caintliv ar fad. It was lovely to be talking to you all, and it's brilliant to have all the interaction as well. Fecum duine ag rá díomh ó chunir na Gaeilge Merlin.
An Gearmáin gur míle maith go Saori. Díomh
an wather fad. Iontacher fad. Oh, and good amach good Patricia. Just Patricia there was just clarifying her what you were saying there. And but that's great. That's great. That you're learning Irish to make it your own. Iontacher fad, iontacher mahu. That's brilliant. Another person there saying that they're a poet and a writer and use Irish in their stories. That's wonderful. Exactly what to do with your Irish. Just use it as much as possible. Exactly. Iontacher fad agus iontacher fad. Mar sin gur míle maith ar fad as na cisteanna. Thank you all for the questions. Any that we haven't covered, we'll hopefully cover them next time, but sometimes we just get so many questions, we can't exactly cover them all at once. So of course you can email us if you have any more urgent ones that you need answered soon. Mar sin gur míle maith ar ríis, bhí si go handeas fé caintliv.
We'll be back in September with our next Q&A. We're taking a break next month, so save up all of your questions for us, and we'll answer them all in the autumn. So Gurmila Mahagut sa Siobhan.
Gurmila Mahagut Emma. Lauroi Meliv Guluarish. So we'll talk to you soon again. Slán go fóil.
Slán.